Hello, my name is Adam.
I'm Swarnim,
And I'm Ameen.
and today we're going to be talking about standardized tests. More specifically, about how standardized tests have been monopolized by Colleboard in the U.S. So standardized tests are, like a big way for colleges to gauge the levels of students and see who they want to admit. And while that is a necessary thing, colleges need to know who their students are and who they can admit, they also have had many issues according with them. More specifically, with Colleboard monopolizing them.
Yeah, I completely agree with that. And I think the monopoly that College Board has can be easily exploited. For example, College Board markets itself as a non-profit organization. Yet, according to a source written by Barina Swetha, College Board brings in about $1.2 billion of revenue every year from students paying for SAT and AP exam products.
And I'd like to sit on that SAT topic for a second because I feel like the SAT is designed to put minorities back due to the fact that they don't get the same level of education, and you're essentially just setting them up for low-class jobs in the future.
Yeah, and along with that, rather than just minorities, it kind of is not very effective for everyone in general because it only just focuses on two primary topics, right? The whole point of a standardized test is that you can accurately gauge the whole academic level of a student. But more tests like these SATs, they're not really effective at doing that. Because how they make it difficult is that they take questions at a really low level because they need to be able to stick to a level that students across the whole United States have learned it through high school, and students have various advanced levels of curriculum. So they stick to questions of a really low level, but they spin it in a tricky manner and have a certain question structure that if the students aren't well versed in the question structure, they won't do good on the test. And that's very ineffective.
Yeah, I wanted to discuss that, and I've come to understand that the ineffectuality that you're talking about stems severely from different tutoring systems. What I mean by this is that students in higher brackets of economy have access to expensive tutoring programs and expensive accommodations to help them perform better. One such tutoring is, well, Huntington. Huntington takes advantage of College Board's monopoly on SATs and prep programs to exploit the mandatory regulations that the SAT has for colleges by charging upwards of $4,000 for maybe a couple sessions worth of SAT prep. This is completely crazy, as this basically robs students, and any student unable to afford or access these programs is automatically put at a severe disadvantage compared to other students who do have access to these programs and are able to get this tutoring.
Yeah, and the issue with that is that even in our own school, students are pretty much insufficiently prepared to take tests such as the SAT because you take that around your junior year, right? And there are students that are still learning the Algebra 2 curriculum, which, as we all know, that's what the SAT goes up to in terms of math. And so you can't necessarily expect the student to be able to learn the structure and topics that are going to be covered on the SAT. So, they're being put at an unfair disadvantage.
And mostly, rather than just the content, right? Which, again, the content is in itself a big issue of standardized tests, which you can't really solve because people are going to be at different curriculums. The whole structure issue is that most students don't even realize that the important factor in the SAT and other standardized tests is that they need to realize the question structure, and that's what makes the test difficult. So the students are unprepared, and then whenever they do realize it, they go to find tutoring and help on that. And the only help that is mostly popular and popularized is sponsored through like College Boards such as Huntington, and it's really expensive. So it's just a very exploitative system in general that just is built for money rather than for actually helping students.
Speaking on the exploitation done by College Board, I've come to see a recent patterns in very big corporations. What I mean by this is that many corporations have access to College Board because corporations need to know how a person performs to be able to hire them. So they have often direct relations to College Board. This forces employees and high-ranking level parents who work at these corporations to push their kids to get as high as possible SAT scores, even if their kids do good, plenty good, and higher than average. Not simply because they want to see their kids succeed, although most parents do, but to keep this positive image, as due to the direct correlation that College Board has to big corporations, this causes these big corporations to attempt to keep a positive image of themselves by showing that, all of our employees have good College Board exam rates, all of our employees as kids have all of this. So as the parents push these kids, it puts a lot of stress on them and the parents, because a parent with a student who has a bad SAT average may look bad towards different companies discussing with the CEO and could hang their job in the balance.
Oh, that's interesting. Well, what would be a way to solve this then?
Primarily, we could solve it through the diversification of the structure of the SAT, because covering only 2 topics as basic as math and English, it doesn't necessarily allow, it's not a true test of what a student is capable of, and this might be more of a personal thing, but it's truly unfair that the college admission process completely, essentially, your fate is sort of based on your performance on a test that doesn't really, it's not a true representation of your full capacities. So I think diversifying the structure and the content overall of the SAT, sort of like what the ACT does, would be one of the solutions to this problem.
Yeah.
Rather than diversifying the SAT to make it more like the ACT, I think a slightly easier approach, because College Board is such a huge company, I don't think we can put that much pressure on them to change themselves. But rather than that, what if we had more standardized tests, such as the ACT, that compete with College Board, but use a different language and a different primary courses? So the ACT has more science-based questions. So if we had another standardized test that focused more on history aspects and the others, if we just had a more diversified questionings and the more diversified subjects, then that would be a better way to both compete with College Board and reduce their monopoly in the market, and also help students.
I completely agree with that. I've come to notice a trend with the recent rise in ACT takeage rates, and it's that many students may perform slightly below average on SATs, maybe get 1100s, maybe 1000s. While this is objectively considered bad by modern standards, many of these students will divert all of their resources to the ACT because it targets their strengths. And since ACTs are considered just as important as SATs, basically they both being substitutes for each other, doing good on an ACT can still land many students in very high quality colleges. This leads to a much more diverse and fair program, as certain students who may struggle in the reading and writing parts of the SATs can find themselves much stronger in the mathematical and science aspects, because reading often stems strongly from childhood. A person who has experience reading in English and writing in their childhood may find the SAT a lot easier and have an unfair advantage over students who are not able to speak English as their first language. The ACT provides a sort of alternative for these students so that they can still focus on important aspects such as math and science while maintaining a good positive look on colleges without having to struggle with the unfair advantage of not being able to speak English perfectly.
There are some limitations to this too, however, because College Board is such a massive thing. I'm sure if we started promoting other standardized tests such as the ACT, they would also start having some pushback and maybe implement their own versions of it. And then also with their own versions, it would come the same issues as the SAT. This is kind of what they did with the AP tests, how they started to diversify their own markets, but use even though they were pushing into other markets, they kept their own strategies with the same flaws. So the AP tests have the same flaws as the SATs, however, where they compete with dual credit courses. So it would be not as effective as on paper, but I feel like even through these flaws, having this solution is going to push in the right path towards fighting off College Board's monopoly. And in the future, with the help of like similar solutions, I feel like we can actually work towards breaking the monopoly.